Good evening. As John said, I'm a member of the Young Professionals Organization of the Chamber. And I've been asked by our organization to moderate tonight. I'll be introducing both gentlemen, candidates for the 20th Congressional seat in New York State. First, I'd like to welcome and introduce Chris Gibson, the challenger for the 20th District seat. Chris Gibson is from Columbia County. Chris is from Columbia County and lives with his wife Mary Jo and their 3 children around the corner from where he grew up. For 24 years, Chris served our country in the Army, rising to the rank of colonel. He deployed 7 times, including 4 combat tours to Iraq. Just prior to retirement, he led the 2nd Brigade Combat Team of the 82nd Airborne Division relief efforts in Haiti. Among his military accomplishments are 2 Legions of Merit, 4 Bronze Stars, and Purple Heart. Chris received his bachelor's degree as ARCC student at CN College. He holds an MPA and PhD in government from Cornell University and taught American politics at West Point. He authored Securing the State, a book on national security decision making, and is running to continue his public service, this time as our representative in Congress. Thank you, Chris. Next, I'd like to introduce and welcome Representative Scott Murphy, our Congressman for the 20th District of New York. As many of us know, Scott lives in Glens Falls here with his wife Jen and 3 children, Simone, Lux, and Duke. Prior to his election last year, he worked as a businessman and helped create over 1,000 jobs. A graduate of Harvard University, he is the son of a postal worker and teacher. Prior to being elected to the House of Representatives, Scott was a successful entrepreneur, having formed Small World Software, which was later sold to IXL. In the 8 years prior to his election to the House of Representatives, Scott worked for Advantage Capital Partners, a group who focused on helping businesses grow and create jobs for their local communities. During his first term in Congress, Scott has set a high standard of openness and transparency, visiting all 137 towns in our district, hosting more than 150 public meetings with residents and private industry leaders to discuss important and national issues, and posting his daily schedule online. National Journal has ranked Scott as one of the most centrist members of Congress. Please join me in welcoming both gentlemen. All right. Before we begin tonight, just a little background on the format. Questions were submitted to members of the Young Professionals Organization. From the questions presented, we selected what we thought would not only provide the greatest range of discussion tonight, but also would permit both gentlemen an opportunity to provide clear answers to issues facing all of us as voters this fall. In this regard, I had a chance to speak with both gentlemen before we came out here tonight, and standing what both of them have said, it's our collective expectation that the answers will apply to the questions that are asked, and we don't expect character or attacks back and forth against one another, and they both agreed. Both gentlemen agreed, and we look forward to those answers here tonight. I also wanted to take a quick note about applause. We do have a limited time limit. We've got about an hour or so, and we've got enough questions really to fill that time. Any lengthy or applause is going to cut in that time for their answers, so we ask that you hold your applause until the end of the evening time. At this time, I'll ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Prior to introductions, we decided the order of opening and closing statements by the flip of the coin. Mr. Murphy won the toss and has elected to open second. And as a result, Mr. Gibson will have the opportunity to open first tonight.
Well, thank you, Matt. And first of all, to all the young professionals here at the Chamber, it's a great honor to be with you. I appreciate your initiative that you've shown pulling together this forum. I also want to thank Scott Murphy for being here this evening, for being willing to come out and debate the issues. It says a lot about his character. And as we gather here tonight, too many of our neighbors are out of work. You look at the latest job figures today, and we continue to see an increase in the number of Americans who are applying for unemployment insurance. In the last 3 out of 4 weeks, we've had an increase in new claims. And this week you also saw that real estate sales dropped. And we have anemic GDP growth. And I think we'll see more about that tomorrow when a new report comes out. You look at all of our leading economic indicators, and you'll see that there is severe stress. Our economy is underperforming. In essence, we have a hostile and uncertain business environment. And that's the reason why we're not creating jobs. And the Congress's response to that has been a series of tax, borrow, and spend stimulus bills that have failed us. And now we sit at $13 trillion debt. And to be clear, both parties had something to do with that. I think it's fair to say that Republicans and Democrats share the blame for the $13 trillion debt that we have. But this year's budget, at $1.3 trillion deficit, is the largest on record. Now, you know, I come from a working class family. We never had a lot of money, but we didn't spend more than we had. We had a budget. Most responsible American families do. Our Congress does not have a budget. This is the first time since 1974 we have no budget. Without a budget, you can't govern. Without a budget, there's no plan for job growth. No plan for fiscal responsibility. We've got a crisis of principled leadership right now. Our campaign is focused on solving the major problems of our time, growing the private sector economy, balancing our budget, and protecting our freedoms. And to come up with our program, we listen carefully to small business owners and their employees. They tell us the impediments to growth, and they are taxation, regulation, and healthcare costs. And that's why our campaign stands with targeted tax and regulatory relief and to repeal and replace the healthcare bill, because those are the impediments to growth and those are the issues that need to be addressed. And we're for balancing the budget to reduce federal spending. I fought for our country, and now I'm ready to serve you in the United States Congress. I appreciate this opportunity to be with you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having us here. I appreciate the Adirondack Regional Chamber having us here, and it's great to be here in the Hive, one of the real treasures of our community here in Glens Falls, and a great place to have a venue like this. So, very excited to be here, and I appreciate Chris coming and joining us for this debate. Thank you. So, this election is going to be about the economy. It's going to be about jobs and about economic growth. How do we get people back to work? And that's exactly why I'm running for Congress. I think I have the skills and the experience that are the right ones to send to Congress to work on that issue. That's what I've been doing my entire adult life. I started several businesses. My first one when I was 23 years old in my living room, a classic startup. You go to work during the day and you come home at night and you order Chinese food and you work in your living room to build your first business. So I know the hurdles that our small businesses face here in New York. Been involved with helping over 20 companies grow and helped create over 1,000 jobs right here in New York State. That's the hurdles that I've seen. Those are the experiences that I bring to the table. And they're not partisan or ideological plans. It's a common sense problem-solving approach that you bring to things. I can tell you, I've never sat at a business meeting and said, well, we need to find our next customer. We got to find some more revenue, but we can't call that guy because he's a Republican. Or we can't call that person because she's a Democrat. That's not how we solve problems when we're building businesses. That's not how we solve problems here in upstate New York. We look for the best solutions that are available, and then we try to implement them. That's the way I approach solving problems in government. That's why you hear people like the National Journal say I'm one of the most centrist candidates or people that serve in the Congress, because it's about solving problems and coming up with solutions. And this election is about some hard stuff that we've got to do. We've got to bring fiscal responsibility back to Washington. That's an issue I'm passionate about. It's something I've got experience with every year, sitting down and setting a budget and then making hard decisions and telling people they can't do this, they can't do that, because you've got to stay within a budget. That's what we do as business people. That's what I do every day in Washington, and that's what I'll do if you send me back to Washington. So for me, it's about solving problems and who's got the right experience to get this economy going.
Thank you, John. Now we're going to turn to the questions that we've come up with for tonight. The order of the question will be posed, and both gentlemen will be offered 2 minutes to respond. We do have a lovely timekeeper with us tonight, so we'll ask both gentlemen to follow the signs and the cues that we are going to be given. The first question we're going to start off with is a topic that is near and dear to many people in this room, that's student loans. In the current economic climate, it is easier for many of us to obtain a 4% rate to refinance or purchase a residence than it is for us to refinance a student loan. Though some argue that the reluctance in lenders to lend refinance on student loans is due to risk, defaults and that kind of thing, particularly in today's economy. It would seem that the federal government would be able to encourage student lending entities to refinance student loans, particularly those with strong payment backgrounds. What are your thoughts on incentivizing the student lending entities to refinance or modify student loans at current lower interest rates? Start with interest.
Okay. Well, first of all, is we need a change in regulation because really at this point in time, you can consolidate one time. We need to change that regulation. I mean, here you have an economy now where interest rates are lower than the rates that you see with Sallie Mae, and yet our students don't have the ability to refinance, and I think that's wrong. And I will tell you that it's indicative of an approach that has been taken over the last 18 months. You look at the health care bill, and we ended up essentially with a government takeover of student loans. And I reject that. I do not think that was the way to go. I think we should keep the student loan industry as competitive as possible, and that will help. That will help students not only have access to a wide variety of places to get a loan, but also to refinance and enjoy the same APRs that we're seeing now in the market.
Thanks, Matt. This is a critical issue. We see this all over upstate New York. We've got a lot of people going back to school in these tough economic times, and we've got a lot of young professionals like people here in this room that have used student loans and are struggling to pay them off. But this is a case where I actually disagree very strongly with my opponent. He believes that what we did with the legislation we passed last year is the wrong way to go. I think it's absolutely the right way to go. Last year we passed regulation that changed the student loan industry. And here's how it used to work. Government backed the loans 100%. Big banks got an $80 billion subsidy to underwrite those loans, even though if they went bad, the government owned it. That made no sense. We changed the program so there's no more $80 billion subsidy for private banks. Seems like a great step forward in my opinion. Private banks can still make student loans, but there's no $80 billion subsidy coming from the government. Instead, we took that money and used it for grants and loans and to invest in our community colleges and early childhood education and to pay down some of the debt. That was a common sense solution. The only people that were opposed to it were some of the banks that got the subsidies. Across the board, otherwise, this is the kind of common sense solution that we need to save dollars and use them for the priorities that we need. And in these communities, up here in upstate New York, we need help with student loans, being able to afford to go to college. We need help for our education system. That early childhood money is stuff that will keep costs down for our local school districts, which means property taxes. I don't have to tell anyone in this room where our property taxes here in New York are. They're way too high. Anything we can do that's going to help cut those costs is a great step forward. My opponent thinks it's the wrong way to go. In fact, he wants to repeal this change. I think it's absolutely the right way to go forward.
On that note, both raised the cost of higher education. I want to actually follow up on that. Some of the articles that we've seen